we're going to get into this. So, United Nations is investigating police abuse in 6 U.S. cities, including New York. This is reported on May the 1st, not May the 7th. So that's only 6 days ago. And the interesting part about that is what's being said in the article here from Pix 11 here. In the wake of George Floyd's unaliving, the UN is investigating police abuse in 6 cities across the country, including New York. The United Nations last month set up a team called Expert Mechanism to Advance Racial Justice and Equality in Law Enforcement, EMLER, to probe excessive force used against Black people since Floyd's passing in police custody. His murder, I should say, in police custody in Minnesota in 2020, according to organizers. The panel will be holding a public hearing Wednesday in New York City at the Malcolm X Shabazz Center at 3940 Broadway. So they're already in the U.S. They're in 6 different U.S. cities right now. They are going across the U.S. showing people that there's a problem with U.S. law enforcement and that U.S. law enforcement doesn't care about the people. It's like Michael Jackson always told you, they don't really care about us. MJ was right. They don't really care about us. They never did. The EMLR team will listen to testimony from victims' family members and other topics, including stop and frisk, racial profiling, and the conditions at Rikers, organizers said. Law enforcement personnel, government officials, lawyers, and civil groups will also speak at the hearings. It is unclear which families would be represented, but there have been several high-profile deaths in police custody in New York City, including Eric Garner, Sean Bell, Amadou Diallo, and Abner Loima. Garner's chokehold death occurred during an arrest on Staten Island nearly 9 years ago. Former NYPD police officer Daniel Pantaleo was fired in 2019 after a department trial found he used excessive force to restrain Garner, who was 43 at the time, and he had children. He had kids. I want people to realize that. This man was a father. This man was a father. I want people to realize that, and I want people to not lose sight of that. This man was a father. Let's not lose sight of that. This man was a father. Sean Bell, 23, he passed away in the hail of bullets, 50 bullets, fired from undercover NYPD officers as he left his bachelor party at a Queens nightclub in 2006. The officers in Bell's case were found to have violated NYPD protocols, but they have received little to no punishment. The 3-member panel includes experts from the U.S., South Africa, and Argentina, and will hold similar hearings in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Chicago, and Minnesota, organizers said. So basically, the UN is saying ACAB. The UN is saying that cops are trash and we know it. The UN is saying, hey, we are tired of going through all the motions. We know cops are trash. That's why they are even here. Why would the UN even bother? Why would the UN even bother if that wasn't the case? Let's get into this right here. So this is coming back from February the 10th of this year. UN experts call for new approaches to policing in the U.S. following the deaths of Keenan Anderson and Tyree Nichols. So the UN is saying this. You know, I talked about this in my last stream that was on desktop, not the one that I was on like mobile with, but the one that I was on desktop. I talked about this. I mentioned this. You know, I mentioned this. And it's very fascinating to me. It is extremely fascinating to me how people have just forgotten about what occurred with the UN, how they've been criticizing U.S. police, how there's actually a standard, an international standard for policing in the U.S. that we've been ignoring for the longest time. And now the UN is in the U.S. right now in 6 different U.S. cities, lecturing us about the police that honestly they should be, but this is from February the 10th of this year, right? And I talked about this on my last desktop stream, right? When I was at my desk, UN experts have expressed great concern over the deaths of Keenan Anderson on 3 January 2023 at the hands of Los Angeles. At the hands of the LAPD, and Tyree Nichols after he was beaten by police in Memphis, Tennessee on January the 7th. The brutal deaths of Keenan Anderson and Tyree Nichols are more reminders of the urgency to act, said Yvonne Mokgaro, chairperson of the UN International Independent Expert Mechanism to Advance Racial Justice and Equality in the Context of Law Enforcement. That is quite a mouthful. So basically, EMLR. I think that was the acronym that they use. And make sure I use that because that is a mouthful. So it's EMLER. Imler. I'm going to use Imler. Jesus. Good Lord. That is quite a mouthful, guys. Quite a mouthful. The experts have sought detailed information on both the Anderson and Nichols incidents from the government of the United States on the ongoing investigations and regulations applicable to the use of less than lethal weapons, vice versa, applicable human rights standards. In both cases, the experts stressed that the force used appears to have violated international norms protecting the right to life and prohibiting torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. It is also not in line with standards set out under the UN Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials and the basic principles of the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials. So there's actually a standard, and I went over this in my last stream. That's actually a standard. It's actually a standard. It's actually a standard. And top of the morning to you, KG. Top of the morning to you, Matrix. I agree, but sadly, reparations were already given out in America to the slave masters, $300 per year. Getting a slave master, so it's definitely time for us to get ours. I'm gonna always mention that. You know, I don't see that as a distraction from what I'm doing here. I think reparations should be paid to Foundation of Black Americans or Black Descendants of American Slaves, whatever you want to call us. You know exactly who we are. The ones who can trace our lineage to chattel slavery here. The ones who can trace our lineage to even beyond that here, even before that. The ones that were already here. We need our chips. We need our money so that we can set up legal funds. We can set up our own police departments, our own law enforcement agencies, so that we can either punish these race soldiers or we can actually police ourselves without the help of this racist white supremacist government, this racist white supremacist country, and without the help of the racist white supremacist Joe Biden. In both cases, the experts stress. Oh no! Actually, I don't want to. I don't want to go back over that. I want to bring this up again because many people haven't seen this. No, I want to bring it up in a new tab. They haven't seen this. So there's a basic standard for how law enforcement, a basic international standard of how law enforcement is supposed to treat people. Make sure you guys share the stream, share it out. Make sure you guys tell the people about it that's going, because people have to see this kind of stuff. So this is actually a code of conduct for law enforcement officials that is an international standard. It was set in 1979. It was set in December 17th, 1979. It was a UN General Assembly resolution. So all countries who are part of the United Nations, for the most part, agree with this. And it is interesting how the police here in the US, they don't follow this. It is very interesting how US law enforcement in this country, they don't follow this. It's very fascinating. It's very fascinating because the UN right now, they are in. I want to remind you guys, they are in the US right now in 6 different US countries, and probably gonna actually go. They're gonna actually go to more. And they're hearing testimonies from US citizens about police violence. The United Nations is on US soil right now, taking testimony from the victims and the victims' families and the survivors and surviving family members of victims of police violence. Do you understand how insane that is? The United Nations has to come over here and tell us ACAB. The United Nations has to come over here and tell us that our cops are exactly what black people have been telling you the entire time. A bunch of race soldiers who violate women, violate children, predators. They're the ones selling all the freaking dope. Think about it. They know where all the freaking dope dealers are. They know where all the addicts are. They know where the best time to sell. They know where all the cops are. They are the cops, right? So let's get deeper into this. And I want to go ahead and get into this, right? So the code of conduct for law enforcement officials. Article 1. Law enforcement officials should at all times fulfill the duty imposed upon them by law by serving the community and by protecting all persons against illegal acts consistent with the high degree of responsibility required by their profession. Also, KG, I made you a moderator. Have fun. Commentary. The term law enforcement officials includes all officers of the law, whether appointed or elected, who exercise police powers, especially the powers of arrest or detention. 2. In countries where police powers are exercised by military authorities, whether uniformed or not, or state security forces, the definition of law enforcement officials shall be regarded as including officers of such services. 3. Service to the community is intended to include particularly the rendition of services of assistance to those members of the community who, by reason of personal, economic, social, or other emergencies, are in need of immediate aid. 4. This provision is intended to cover not only all violent, predatory, and harmful acts, but extends to the full range of prohibitions under penal statutes. It extends to conduct by persons not capable of incurring criminal liability. So you see that it's actually a standard. There's actually a standard, and it actually goes on. It actually is pretty defined here. Article 2. In the performance of their duty, law enforcement officials shall respect and protect human dignity and maintain and uphold the human rights of all persons. Commentary. A. The human rights in question are identified and protected by national and international law. Among the relevant international instruments are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, the Declaration on the Protection of All Persons from being subjected to torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, the United Nations Declaration on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid, the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, and the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. B. National commentaries to this provision should indicate regional or national provisions identifying and protecting these rights. More standards set by law enforcement, by all these committees, all these declarations, and U.S. law enforcement has totally ignored it. Totally ignored it. Article 3. Law enforcement officials may use force only when strictly necessary and to the extent required for the performance of their duty. Commentary. A. This provision emphasizes that the use of force by law enforcement should be exceptional. It should be. I want to go over that one more time. This provision emphasizes that the use of force by law enforcement officials should be exceptional. It should be exceptional. It means it should be rare. It should be Bigfoot, basically. It should be a UFO sighting. It should be exceptionally rare. It should be so rare that when you see it happen, it should be a shock to the system. It shouldn't be everyday regular news. It shouldn't be everyday regular news, but it is everyday regular news now. Part B. National law ordinarily restricts the use of force by law enforcement officials in accordance with the principle of proportionality. It is to be understood that such national principles of proportionality are to be respected in the interpretation of this provision. I'm going to read that again. So it's not about the interpretation of U.S. law enforcement, but international law. I'm going to read that one part again. Part B. National law ordinarily restricts the use of force by law enforcement officials in accordance with the principle of proportionality. It is to be understood that such national principles of proportionality are to be respected in the interpretation of this provision. In no case should this provision be interpreted to authorize the use of force which is disproportionate to the legitimate objective to be achieved, which means that you should use the least amount of force possible to do your job. That's what the United Nations is saying. So it would be something if the United Nations condemns U.S. law enforcement again, because that would be a bad look. That would be a bad look. Part C, the use of firearms is considered an extreme measure, meaning that combine this sentence right here on Part C. The use of firearms is considered an extreme measure. Now, combine that with this. It means that whenever U.S. law enforcement use their firearms and it's not justified, or whenever it doesn't conform to UN standards, and most of them don't, a lot of times, especially in certain states like Florida, California, New York. I mean, he just named the cases. Just go through all the cases. Is a violation of international standards and resolutions and agreements and declarations made by the United Nations. This is why the United States government can't criticize China. You can't criticize Russia. You can't criticize Brazil. You can't criticize Barbados. You can't criticize Australia. You can't criticize Russia. You can't criticize anybody because you are outside of UN standards and norms. You are absolutely outside of UN standards and norms. And we're going to get into Article 4 now. Matters of a confidential nature in the possession of law enforcement officials shall be kept confidential unless the performance of duty or the needs of justice strictly require otherwise. Commentary. By the nature of their duties, law enforcement officials obtain information which may relate to private lives or be potentially harmful to the interests and especially the reputation of others. Great care should be taken and exercised in safeguarding and using such information, which should be disclosed only in the performance of duty or to serve the needs of justice. Any disclosure of such information for other purposes is wholly improper. Can you think of how many cases where law enforcement has posted people's mugshots on Valentine's Day because they missed a freaking child support payment? Yeah, that actually happened. That actually happened. I've had cases just like that. In fact, if you don't believe that, I want you to realize this, right? This last part of Article 4 of the Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials for every UN host nation country. Okay? Any disclosure of such information for other purposes is wholly improper. Let me point something out to you. So, look at this. So, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department, Joe Arpaio, he was posting people's mugshots for failure to pay child support. I'm going to go back over to this part here, right? I want to go back over to this part for the Code of Conduct. Matters of a confidential nature, like people's mugshots and that kind of stuff, and if they pay child support and that kind of stuff. Matters of a confidential nature in the possession of law enforcement officials shall be kept confidential unless the performance of duty or the needs of justice strictly require otherwise. So if you weren't posting those on a regular, why are you posting on Valentine's Day? Why do you pick a holiday? Why do you pick a holiday? Share. Look at this. This is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Well, no, I don't want to pay for the subscription. I don't want to give them any kind of. But again, you look at Joe Arpaio. Sheriff Joe Arpaio he's actually prioritizing the arrest of deadbeat parents, and this guy's a scumbag. He's a criminal himself. So, you know, it was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. You know, it's the UN has a code of conduct for all cops in all host nation countries, in all host member countries. And it's strange how these people never follow that code of conduct. Very strange. Article 5. Let's move on here. No law enforcement official may inflict, instigate, or tolerate any act of torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, nor may any law enforcement official invoke superior orders or exceptional circumstances such as a state of war or a threat of war, a threat of national security, international or internal political instability, or any other public emergency as a justification for torture or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. So when these cops were killing people, when these cops were out here beating up people and using riots or protests or mass demonstrations as a justification to do so, that was a violation of Article 5 of the Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials for host member countries of the United Nations. Now, when people come at you and they say silly stuff, you can bring that up now. Say, Hey, you can't mention Saudi Arabia. You can't mention China. You can't mention Rwanda. You can't mention the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can't mention any other country. Oh, and they're violation of human rights. When you are violating, when your law enforcement officials routinely, so far they violated pretty much Articles 1 through 5 of the Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials for UN host member countries. Okay. See, this is why U.S. law enforcement and people who support police officers and undercover ops and agents, this is why they don't particularly like me. Because I give you the facts. I give you the weapons. Commentary. Hey, this provision. Give me a second. Let me get something to drink. That's high C. Very delicious. Commentary. Part A. This provision derives from the Declaration of the on the protection of all persons from being subjected to torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, adopted by the General Assembly, according to which, quote, such an act is an offense to human dignity and shall be condemned as a denial of the purposes of the Charter of the UN and as a violation of the human rights and fundamental freedoms proclaimed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other international human rights instruments, end quote. So basically, when you had cops out here putting people in paddy wagons, you had cops out here shooting less than lethal rounds at people's homes. When you had cops out here beating up people, mass detaining people, they were violating Article 5, Part A, and most likely Part B, which we're going to get into now. The Declaration defines torture as follows, quote, torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted by or at the instigation of a public official on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or confession, punishing him for an act he has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating him or other persons. It does not include pain or suffering arising only from inherent in or incidental to lawful sanctions to the extent consistent with the standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners, end quote. So basically, long story short, you can't just torture people to obtain information. You can't just beat them up to teach them a lesson. You can't just beat them up because they're a liberal. You can't just beat them up because, they're a right-winger. You can't just beat them up because, they're black. Or they're a woman. Or they're gay. Or what have you. You can't beat people up for any reason. But especially not those reasons. Part C. The term cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment has not been defined by the General Assembly, but should be interpreted so as to extend the widest possible protection against abuses, whether physical or mental. So it is a wide blanket. When police officers do things like lock you up and deny you a phone call, or deny you or try to move you around so that your lawyer can't find you, it's a violation of it's not only a violation of the Constitution and of most likely state and federal laws, but definitely like federal laws, but it's also a violation of UN law. The UN standard set by law enforcement, I should say the UN standard set for law enforcement for host member nations. Article 6. Law enforcement officials shall ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and in particular shall take immediate action to secure medical attention whenever required. Ervo Otiento. Let's get into that. This case. Let's go back into this code of conduct here. I want to read that over again. Law enforcement officials. This is, again, the code of conduct for law enforcement officials for UN host member countries. Article 6. Law enforcement officials shall ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and in particular shall take immediate action to secure medical attention whenever required. Irvo Otieno. An autopsy finds that Irvo Otieno, held down by deputies and hospital workers, asphyxiated. It was a George Floyd situation. Yeah, basically. Irvo Otieno, a 28-year-old black man whose passing last month at a Virginia mental health hospital has sparked outrage, led to a second-degree murder charges against 10 defendants. He passed away from positional and mechanical asphyxia with restraints, a medical examiner's office said on Monday. Take a snapshot of that. Let's go back to Article 6. Law enforcement officials shall ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and in particular shall take immediate action to secure medical attention whenever required. Let's go into another case. LaShawn Thompson. This is the condition that LaShawn Thompson's his cell was in Georgia. LaShawn Thompson, he was eaten by bugs in a jail. I'm going to read this again. Article 6 of the UN Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials for host member countries. I'm going to read that again. Law enforcement officials shall ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and in particular shall take immediate action to secure medical attention whenever required. LaShawn Thompson. Man eaten alive by bed bugs in Atlanta jail. A man who passed away in an Atlanta jail was eaten alive by insects and bed bugs, the family lawyers has alleged. LaShawn Thompson was jailed on a misdemeanor and placed in the Fulton County Jail psychiatric wing after officials judged him mentally ill. Family attorney Michael D. Harper released photos showing Mr. Thompson's body riddled with bugs. Pause there for a second. Article 6 of the UN Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials for host members countries. This was a standard that was set by the United Nations since 1979. I'm going to read Article 6 one more time. I know I read it a lot. I want to read it one more time and then go back over that story. Law enforcement officials shall ensure the full protection of the health of persons in their custody, and in particular shall take immediate action to secure medical attention whenever required. This is a quote from Michael D. Harper, the family's attorney. Quote, Mr. Thompson was found in a filthy jail cell after being eaten alive by insects and bed bugs, end quote. Quote, the jail cell Mr. Thompson was housed in was not fit for a diseased animal. He did not deserve this, end quote. I want you to see this. LaShawn Thompson was treated worse than a prisoner of war. Do you get that? Do you get that? LaShawn Thompson was treated worse than a prisoner of war. Let's go back here. You know, I always want to talk about that, brother, because I don't want people to forget that case. And I'm going to keep following that case. I want to see the outcome of that. And I'm going to keep pressure on law enforcement. I want to see, and the people who were charged, I think there are more people involved. I think those are the 10 people that they want to catch the fall. You know, people who are being investigated. I want more people being investigated for over that case and Irvo Otieno. It's a violation of the UN Code of Conduct for law enforcement officials. I'm not asking for anything crazy, right? Commentary. 1. Medical attention, which refers to services rendered by any medical personnel, including certified medical practitioners and paramedics, shall be secured when needed or requested. I want to highlight this because a lot of correctional officers, they will complain about inmates wanting medical attention. I want to read this one more time. Medical attention, which refers to services rendered by any medical personnel, including certified medical practitioners and paramedics, shall be secured when needed or requested. There is no set amount of times that an inmate can ask for medical personnel. If they ask for it, you bring it. And if they're just asking for it and they don't need it, that's not for you to decide. You let the nurse decide that, or the doctor, and then they'll stop coming when that patient starts calling again. You let the medical staff determine that. And then when something happens, it's on the medical staff. It's not on you as the officer at that point. Because you would have done your damn job. Part 2. While the medical personnel are likely to be attached to the law enforcement operation, law enforcement officials must take into account the judgment of such personnel when they recommend providing the person in custody with appropriate treatment, though, through or in consultation with medical personnel from outside law enforcement from outside the law enforcement operation, meaning that consider their safety too, of course. Give some consideration, but don't overdo it, okay? All right, if someone's thrashing because they're having a seizure or they're having some kind of medical episode, they still got to get in there, okay? 3. It is understood that law enforcement officials shall also secure medical attention for victims of violation of law or of accidents occurring in the course of violations of law. Meaning that if someone's hurt because of a criminal act, you have to call for help. If you say that you're a public servant, I don't see why you wouldn't do that by default. But some cops don't do that. And this last part is interesting. I want you to see something. I want you to see this. So this is a man who was attacked on a New York subway, right? And there were 2 NYPD police officers who went into another part of the actual subway train and hid because they believed the guy had a gun, but he had a knife. And there was reports of this person having a knife. There was never a report of this person having a gun. And the cops didn't help this person. Person being freaking attacked. I want you to see this. Now, a man who was brutally stabbed by Brooklyn subway slasher Maxim Gelman 2 years ago had his negligence case against the city dismissed in court yesterday, despite the fact that 2 transit officers had locked themselves in a motorman's car only a few feet away from him at the time of the attack. So basically, police in the U.S. and U.S. law enforcement in general have no constitutional duty to protect you. 0. They have no duty to protect you. And I want you to see this. Gelman stabbed Joseph Lozito in the face, neck, and hands and head on an Uptown 3 train in February of 2011 after fatally stabbing 4 people and injuring 3 others in a 28-hour period. Lozito, a father of 2 and an avid martial arts fan, was able to tackle Gelman and hold him down, and Gelman was eventually arrested by the transit officers. Lozito sued the city, arguing that the police officers had locked themselves in the conductor's car and failed to come to his aid at the time. So, the city, meanwhile, claimed that the NYPD had no special duty to intervene at the time, and that they were in the motorman's car because they believed Gelman had a gun. And Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Margaret Chan has sided with the city, noting that there is no evidence that the cop was aware Lozito was in danger at the time. Chan did, however, note the heroism of Lozito's actions. The dismissal of this lawsuit does not lessen Mr. Lozito's bravery or the pain of his injuries, she wrote in her decision yesterday. Mr. Lozito heroically maneuvered the knife away from Gelman and subdued him on the subway floor. Gelman was sentenced to 200 years in prison in January of 2012. He was sentenced to an additional 25 years for Lozito's stabbing the following month. And I'm gonna point something out to you. The cops were well aware. They saw the guy. They saw the guy going around stabbing people, and they hid in a subway car. They hid in a subway car. They have no special duty to protect people. I want you to see this. Police have no duty to protect citizens. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of people don't know this. Find law. I want to go to an actual law site here. This is a find law. Do the police have an obligation to protect you? I want you to see this. This is interesting. It's interesting. The Uvalde, Texas School District Police Department has received withering criticism for its failure to stop a school gunman who shot and took out 19 people, including kids and 2 teachers. While the shooter was inside the 2 adjoining classrooms, 19 law enforcement officials, 19 cops, 19 pigs, stood outside for nearly an hour as they waited for technical equipment to arrive. Texas Department of Public Safety Colonel Stephen McGraw called it the wrong decision, period. The wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that. Calling the response 100% flawed, Thor Ells, executive director of the National Tactical Officers Association, said, if you are in a classroom with innocent victims and I know that shots have been fired, I need to engage you. Unfortunately, families of the victims have little legal recourse against the police because police officers are typically protected from lawsuits by qualified immunity. Police occasionally face consequences for their actions, like when Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was convicted of murdering George Floyd. But criminal charges against police officers who fail to protect the public are extremely rare. Questions of police duty. The motto "to protect and serve," first coined by LAPD in the 1950s, has widely been copied by police departments everywhere. But what exactly is a police officer's legal obligation to protect people? Must they risk their lives in dangerous situations like the one in Uvalde? The answer is no. I want to say that again. Must they risk their lives in dangerous situations like the one in Uvalde? The answer is no. Police have no legal obligation to protect you or your children. It is codified in law. It has been decided by the U.S. Supreme Court several times. We're going to get into the cases here. In 1981, case Warren v. District of Columbia, the D.C. Court of Appeals held that police have a general public duty, but that no special legal duty exists unless there is a special relationship between an officer and an individual, such as a person in custody. So therefore, police can watch you burn inside of a house. And guess what? They're protected. Yeah. A lot of people don't know that. The U.S. Supreme Court has also ruled that police have no specific obligation to protect. I want to highlight this whole paragraph here. The U.S. Supreme Court, in fact, let me make this a little bigger because I want the bootlickers to see. I want the bootlickers to justify this. I want the bootlickers. Can we make this bigger? Can we make this bigger? Because I want the bootlickers to really have to explain this one. I want them to have to explain this one. That's what I want. Let's make this bigger. I want the bootlickers to see this one. So once again, let's read this again. I want you all to see this. The U.S. Supreme Court has also ruled that police have no specific obligation to protect. In its 1989 decision in DeShaney v. Winnebago County Department of Social Services, the justices ruled that a social services department had no duty to protect a young boy from his abusive father. In 2005's Castle Rock v. Gonzalez, a woman sued the police for failing to protect her from her husband after he violated a restraining order and abducted and unalived their 3 children. Justices said the police had no such duty. Most recently, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld a lower court ruling that police could not be held liable for failing to protect students in the 2008 shooting that claimed 17 lives at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. That is in 2018. So let's look over here. 1, 2, 3, 4 cases that were set this in stone. Now, there's been more cases than that. Don't get me wrong. But these are the main 4. These are the main 4. These are the main 4. See, police have no duty to protect you, and yet people want to fund the pigs. Police guidelines. Police do have protocols for dealing with dangerous scenarios like the ones in Uvalde and Parkland, and these protocols emphasize the need for police to take rapid action. But that doesn't mean anything. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, for instance, says that taking action during active shooter incidents rather than waiting for specially equipped and trained officers can save lives and prevent serious injuries. Time lost by delayed action is likely to result in additional casualties. IACP provides guidance on how officers in those situations should assess how to proceed with that rapid response. No matter how they do it, it will probably be extremely dangerous. They might be risking their own lives. Excuse me. But as courts have determined, they have no obligation to do that. So the next time you see a police car roll by with "to protect and serve" emblazoned on the door, keep in mind they have no constitutional obligation to do that. If you need the police to protect you, all you can do is hope they will. I want to bring that up. Listen, fine law is going ham. Fine law is going ham on them. I want to read to you this last part again. So the next time you see a police car roll by with "to protect and serve" emblazoned on the door, keep in mind they have no constitutional duty or constitutional obligation to do that. If you need the police to protect you, all you can do is hope they will. Now, you might be wondering, what site did I find this on? This is on Find Law, the site where you find lawyers. It's on Find Law. They were pretty frank about it. I want you guys to see something else too from the UN, right? I want you to see this. This is from 8 years ago. The UN went in on U.S. law enforcement, and they pretty much said the U.S. law enforcement is out here torturing black people. I want you to see this.
Today's session was marked by a silent protest. When the U.S. delegation began to address Ferguson and other civil rights cases, a group of protesters stood up, fists raised. Meanwhile, Michael Brown's parents sat and listened attentively as members of the UN Committee Against Torture had some strong words for the United States.
There are disturbing patterns of excessive force on part of police officers, especially towards African Americans and other persons of color, which seem to demonstrate that the current mechanisms of accountability are insufficient.
For its part, the U.S. delegation says the federal government is taking action.
Among the federal government's efforts in Ferguson, Missouri, are an ongoing.
The U.S. government is claiming they're taking action on police violence against citizens. This was 8 years ago. This was 8 years ago. This video is 8 years old. This is the UN's reaction to Ferguson in Missouri to Michael Brown. Jennifer Dynas from the U.S. Justice Department here, and I pray to God she's still not there. She's claiming they're taking action on police violence. We've had Sandra Bland, we've had George Floyd, we've had Tyree Nichols, Sean Bell. I mean, we've had so many people be taken out by police. So many. Saeed Wakim in Washington State. Manny Ellis in Washington State. Tacoma. Think about how many black bodies are in boxes right now since this fool, this suspected white supremacist, since she said this. How many black bodies are in boxes right now? How many? How many? This is another reason this is another reason why we need reparations. Another reason why. We need to produce justice ourselves. We need legal funds. We need the ability to police our own neighborhoods, because clearly these race soldiers, these white supremacist race soldiers, they ain't gonna change. Because our Justice Department is claiming that, oh, we're going to do something about police violence. And the UN has to come in to freaking US cities right now as we speak and try to fix US law enforcement. Let's go read some comments here, man. I want to read some comments. I haven't read a whole lot of comments here. I apologize for that, guys. I apologize. Lamar Ware says cops operate like gangs. That's why they are selling drugs. Absolutely. KG says, let's stay focused on the topic in the comments. Contribute, but don't redirect the conversation. Absolutely. KG, if everyone shares the live to 5 others, we can multiply to 25 plus. Let's share bad cops affect all. Absolutely. 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 I agree. Unrequested edits. Compare that to the escalation of force in the military. Absolutely. KG says Joe is still a sheriff. No, he's not. Need term limits. Joe been in law. He's been in law since 2009. Yeah, absolutely. KG says how did Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, how they did Freddie Gray, Tamir Rice, and Mike Brown. Absolutely. He says strap you to chairs. Yep, they do. Torture. KG says was about to mention this umbrella. Yeah, the guy who was eaten by bedbugs. Yeah. ACAB, what do you think about having a trained inmate trustee type of medical person on the floor? Yeah, I definitely am with that. Annette Brown says, I'm with this, man, because facts are facts. Absolutely. Much love, Annette Brown. Much love. KG says, shake my head. Cops are so brave. No, they are not. But I know you're being sarcastic. Much love, brother. Lamar Ware says, home of the brave. Yeah. Uvalde didn't protect them kids. Sure enough, didn't. KG says, why do cops need qualified immunity if they are so brave? Exactly. If you can do your job without violating without violating the citizens' rights, then you can do that without qualified immunity. Then welcome everybody to the chat. TikTok says I'm trying to share this live, but it won't let me. I don't know. KG says that's false advertising. How many more since 8 years? A lot more. A lot more. Lamar Ware says black blood is overflowing. Absolutely. Absolutely. Patrice says just attacked by a white woman, hit in the head with a bat. Witnesses, street cameras, and they read me. Wow. Wow. I'm so sorry, brother. I'm so sorry, Patrice. I'm not sure if your brother or sister. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Cool Green Bean says abolish local police, reallocate funds to social services, then retrain sheriffs in common law. Yeah, listen. This video is from 8 years ago. I want you all to see this video. It's from 8 years ago. I want you to see this. So you see on the screen here, right? I want you to see how old this video is. It's from 8 years ago. 8 years ago, y'all. The UN was lecturing United States about police. I want you to fast forward to the modern day. The UN right now, the UN, they are in New York, and they are in 6 different U.S. cities. They're in 6 different U.S. cities right now because police are that brutal to black people, in particular in the U.S. But they're brutal, but they are basically brutal to all citizens. So in the modern day, in 2023, they are in 6 different U.S. cities. And 8 years ago, the UN had to come in and tell us that our cops are brutal and violent to the citizens. 8 years ago. Think about that, y'all. Think about that. I want to play that video one more time for you.
Today's session was marked by a silent protest. When the U.S. delegation began to address Ferguson and other civil rights cases, a group of protesters stood up, fists raised. Meanwhile, Michael Brown's parents sat and listened attentively as members of the UN Committee Against Torture had some strong words for the United States.
There are disturbing patterns of excessive force on part of police officers, especially towards African Americans and other persons of color, which seem to demonstrate that the current mechanisms of accountability are insufficient.
For its part, the U.S. delegation says the federal government is taking action.
Among the federal government's efforts in Ferguson, Missouri, are an ongoing and active criminal investigation into the fatal shooting of Michael Brown, which is separate from the local investigation and is looking at whether there were federal civil rights.
Now, they're claiming they looked into what happened to Michael Brown. Do you remember what happened to Michael Brown? Do y'all remember what happened to Michael Brown? You know he got shot by the cop, right? We understand that. But did the cop face any punishment? Did the cop face any punishment? Oh, Missouri police officer who fatally shot Michael Brown faces no charges. So I want you to see the capping, because this is a great time capsule. It's a great time capsule. This catches all the BS that the DOJ and our federal government spews on the regular basis. This catches it, guys. Don't you see it? This catches it, guys. This catches it. This catches it. I want to rewind that. I want you to see that one more. I want you to see the capping this woman's doing right now. The capping. The capping. Jennifer Dynas. The capping. Listen to this. This dude represents Jens Modvik. Jens Modvik, right? He's a member of the UN Committee Against Torture. This man is essentially accusing the United States and its police departments and sheriff's departments and U.S. law enforcement and Blue Lives Matter and pigs of torture. Otherwise, why would he comment? He's accusing them of torture. I want to play that one more time. I want to play that one more time for you guys, because again, it's important that you all hear this. Bridget Thompson says yes. Patrice says yes. I'm a female. Where I was attacked was 10 minutes ago from Ferguson. Police sided with this woman. Do you have footage? Send it to me. I'll air it. For sure. For sure. For sure. Without question. Especially if you are a sister. Especially if you are a sister. Are you okay though? Do you need medical attention? Are you all right? Are you in like a safe place though? Because we got to get somebody out there. We'll do that. Are you safe though? Are you in a good spot? Because if not, then we got to fix that, right? But just let me know if you are in a good spot. If you are safe, send me a message. Make sure if you got any video footage, please send that to me. I'll circulate that myself. Please send that to me. Especially if you are a sister. Oh, yeah. Okay, yes. Yes, contact me. Also, there's a brother named Afro Elite. Reach out to him on Twitter. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to show you who you need to reach out to right now. Because there's a couple of brothers you need to reach out to. If you're on Twitter. One right here, Professor Black Truth. So, I will type it out here. Reach out to him. That's one. But I know one guy who will definitely help you. And that's Afro Elite. Also, make sure you reach out to this brother here, Tariq Nasheed. Because if you a sister, he will jump in without question. The Black Authority. These are brothers that I would reach out to immediately. All right, these are brothers I'll reach out to immediately. Right in between spaces. I don't do trolling. All right, I'm gonna tell you one last time. Don't do that on my channel. Okay? You can leave the chat, but you're not gonna troll here. Patrice says Missouri is a stand your ground state and she started. Well, make sure you reach out to him. Also, running between spaces. I don't care if you have a beef between Tariq Nasheed. We're trying to get this sister some help and assistance, and he's good at that. So I don't do attacks on black men, especially if they've done nothing to me. I don't do that, man. I don't do that. We got enough people out here attacking us. I don't do that. All right? You know, that brother, Jordan Neely, man, like, you look at cases like that, you look at Elijah McClain, it comes from an indifference towards the lives and struggles of black men. Tariq Nasheed is not perfect. He said a lot of things that I don't even agree with. Yeah. But that's not the point. He gets shit done when it's time to get shit done. And I respect that. I don't agree with everything the man says, but that's not the point. When it comes to getting things done in certain spaces, in certain situations, he gets it done, right? Like, there's people out there who don't like me, but will acknowledge that when it comes to cops, I get shit done. You feel me? Like, there's some people out there who don't like Afro Elite, but will admit that when it comes to organizing, when it comes to stepping up for brothers, when it comes to getting the word out, actually standing 10 toes down. If you want somebody in your corner, Afro Elite is your guy. That's one of the guys you're gonna definitely go to. I respect that. I don't have to agree with everything that brother says. I can respect the work that he does. And that's what I want us to get on as black folks. You ain't gotta respect the person. You can respect the work they do.